Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Even Tacos Fall Apart. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today we're talking about vulnerable storytelling, journaling, and yoga. These are the kinds of practices that can truly change the way we experience the world, and today's guest, Katie Bean, knows all about that. Before we dive into my interview with her, let's take a moment to talk about what this episode is all about and why it matters. We live in a world where it's so easy to hide behind filters and pretend that we've got it all together, when really most of us are actually struggling with something. Vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness, it's just a part of being human. But it's not easy to open up about the parts of ourselves we usually keep hidden. It's uncomfortable, it's raw, and it's often the last thing we want to do. But here's the truth. The more we bury those parts of ourselves, the more isolated we feel. That's why sharing our stories, especially the messy ones and the real ones, is so important. It's a way to connect, to heal, and to remind ourselves that we are not alone in this. Journaling is another piece of this puzzle. It's not just writing in a diary or scribbling down thoughts. It's a way to process what's going on in our heads and make sense of the chaos. Those who have listened for a while know that I myself have to journal in a very particular way. But it's a practice that can help us figure out what we're really feeling, what we need, and how we can move forward. Whether you've been journaling for years or even if you've never considered it, this episode might give you a different perspective on how powerful it can be. And then there's yoga. When you hear yoga, you might think of fancy poses or those perfect Instagram shots, but that's not what we're talking about here today. Yoga, at its core, is about tuning in to your body, finding some peace in the midst of everything else going on, and giving yourself the space to just be. It's a practice that doesn't just benefit your body, but your mind too. It's accessible to everyone, regardless of your flexibility or experience. And it's a tool that can help you stay grounded, especially when life gets tough. So why should you keep listening? Because today's conversation with Katie is as real as it gets. We're not sugarcoating anything. We're talking about the hard stuff, the stuff that actually makes a difference in how we live our lives. Katie's journey with these practices, from storytelling to journaling to yoga, offers some incredible insights that I think you'll find both relatable and inspiring. Whether you're looking for ways to cope with stress, trying to connect with others, or you just want to hear a story that's genuine and full of heart, this episode has something for you. But that's enough for me. Let's jump right into my conversation with Katie Bean, and I hope that you stick around. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. I'm really excited for our conversation tonight. I think it's going to be a really good one. I hope that y'all came prepared with some questions and all that good stuff. For those who have not been here before, I am going to open up a question queue that you are welcome to pop your questions into. And Bite Mark is here, so I'm sure she's going to demonstrate for us. And while she does that, I would like to welcome Katie Bean to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Katie.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. So a little bit about Katie, and I've got lots of social links and websites for y'all too, and I'll post those in just a second. Katie is the author of Fragile Thoughts, a Healing Memoir, which was published in May 2023 by New Degree Press. She spends her 9 to 5 empowering college students to embody a healthy lifestyle, and the rest of her time is spent trying to listen to her own advice, which is relatable. She runs a monthly online learning circle, which is a book club with a self-study twist to build connection with the purpose of healing, and is also starting to build a Substack community around that idea as well, because we all have a right to heal, and that's WRITE, to heal in there. So we are going to talk about Fragile Thoughts tonight. So a little bit about Fragile Thoughts. It's written as both a personal narrative and a practical guide to healing, and it explores the intersection of 3 powerful healing tools: writing, vulnerable storytelling in community, and yoga practices, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. So really excited, Katie, to have you with us today, and just thanks for agreeing to come on here and share your story and a little bit of your expertise with us.
Yes, I'm so excited to be talking with you and your community.
Yeah. All right, I've got some links in here. I am posting those. So if you are looking to connect with Katie, they're not posting in YouTube land. So hold on a second. If you're looking to connect with Katie and you're on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Substack, all those places, feel free to click through on any of these and make those connections. So I would love to know, your background is in education, right? So you went to college, you got an education degree, you started kind of in education, and then I know that you faced kind of a challenging work environment in your early career. So what did you learn from that, and how did you manage your own self-care in the face of kind of a challenge like that?
Well, it's interesting. I did not take care of myself and during that time, and that was the biggest lesson, right? That was the biggest challenge. You know that quote, like, how does it go? If you don't pay attention to your wellness, you'll be forced to pay attention to your illness.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened to me, right? So I was right out of grad school, and I was in this mindset of, I wanted to change the world for the better, and I was, willing to put in whatever it took to do it. I wanted to prove myself, prove my worth, right? And at the same time, I was in DC, which is a really kind of cutthroat environment. The culture there, the job I was at was pretty toxic work environment. And I was doing two people's jobs for a few years, not being paid. And, I had that whole imposter syndrome, was certainly playing a role. And I didn't want to let my family down. I didn't want to, I was the first in my family to get a college degree, let alone a master's degree. And, I had to prove myself, I had to continue to prove myself. And so all of this was just so much pressure and pressure and pressure. And all that pressure kind of got to my head, like literally, because I started getting migraines. I started getting sick in all these ways. My body was telling me that I wasn't paying attention to it, right? Like I wasn't paying attention to my wellness. I wasn't doing any of my self-care routines that I knew I needed. I didn't have time, or I didn't make the time. And so I started getting migraines. They became, and I never had them before. I've never had migraines before that time. And they started to get really serious, right? It was once in a while, and then it was once a month, and then it was a few times a month. And every time every time I had one, it was like debilitating. I couldn't do anything. And then it put me behind at work because I couldn't work. And I was stuck in this cycle. And I went to get tests done because I thought, don't ever look at WebMD if you have medical things going on. I thought, something must be going on. And there was nothing going on. My doctor asked if I was stressed. And I was like, yeah, like everybody's stressed. And then the stomach pains began. And these overwhelming pains that I would just drop to the floor. There were times where I would be at work and I would lay in a fetal position on the floor of my office. It was so painful. And I would push into my belly to put pressure on it. That made it feel better. And then it would go away after 3 minutes of that. And I would get up and I would keep working, which I realize now is pretty insane.
Yeah.
And so I was going to the doctor for that and couldn't figure out what it was. And he kept saying, I think you might be stressed. Are you stressed? And I'm like, I guess a little, but I'm pushing through, I'm pushing through. And that was not healthy, and so I kept working. And then I broke out in stress hives all over my body. I thought I was allergic to something. I went right to the doctor. They got me right in. And he literally showed me a book, opened a book and said, here are your hives. And at the top of the page, it said stress hives. And I was like, oh. And he goes, you're stressed. I keep telling you this and you're not listening. So finally, I was convinced that I was stressed.
Yeah.
I knew it, but it really took a lot. My body had to really take over and tell me that I had to resolve a way out of this, right? I had to get out of the job. I had to get out of that town. That whole situation was not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the lesson I learned was just how important it is to make time for self-care, because if you don't, you're going to be forced to pay attention. Your body's going to tell you that you're not listening. I think there's I don't know if it's an old Zen saying or if it's just an old, Buddhist saying, but it's something like you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're really busy, then you should sit for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that kind of idea, right? It's like this idea of when you don't have time, that means you need it even more. And that was the biggest lesson I took out of that, was I was not giving myself the time. I felt like I was working too many hours. I didn't have the time. I could have made the time. And that was the biggest lesson.
Yeah, your body will totally give you away. Like there's no doubt in my mind. Like the biggest thing that I can tell people that if this doesn't prove to you that your body responds to stress in very particular ways, nothing will. Because when I was married in an abusive relationship, things would happen. I would get stress hives around my ring finger. Literally around my ring finger. And they would go out from there. They would go up my finger. They would go down my hand. And then they would start appearing on like my other hand and stuff. And it was just these little stress bumps, but they always started on my ring finger. And I tried like not wearing my ring, and that's still where they would start. And it was like, I don't know how my brain and body said that's where you need to put those, but that is where they started. And if that doesn't just tell you, like, your body is trying to tell you something if you're having all of these issues. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not easy to ignore those signs, but it's easier to say like, okay, well, I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice but to stay in this, situation, but to stay in this job, but to keep doing things the way that I'm doing them. And y'all already know, and I can already hear y'all saying, I'm not even going to look at the chat like, you don't take your own advice, because I don't. I live in stress world. It's the way that I do. But I've taken care of some of the stress that I can take care of. So yeah, man, your body was really just like revolting.
It was revolting. And that book, The Body Keeps the Score, that was it, right? That explained so much to me. So for those who haven't read that book, that's a great one that really explains, how the body holds all of this stress, and it will release it. If you don't release it in healthy ways, it'll release it in the illness and disease and stress hives, apparently, for both of us.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure I've met other people who've had stress hives, but I've never met anyone that I knew also had stress hives. So, hi.
Hi.
What a bummer. I'm sorry for you. Yeah. I mean, exactly. My body was saying, hey, your stress comes from here. And I did take care of that biggest stress, and my divorce was finalized in 2021. But I haven't had stress hives since 2020, when I kicked my ex out in late 2019. That was the last time that I had them. And then they were done.
Right. So that's amazing. And same with me. I didn't have, once I moved and got out of the job and got out of that town, I didn't have a migraine again. Have not had one since. It took a little while for the stomach pains to go away. Turns out I had an ulcer. My body started eating itself. And so that took a little bit more of a change in diet to heal that. But once the stress was gone, and, I didn't have orange juice anymore and a few of the other things, I haven't had any stomach pain either in years.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, that's really wonderful. So we do have a question in the question queue, and this comes from Bite Mark, demonstrating how the queue works. So what is your favorite poem?
Oh, my favorite poem. I love poetry. I write poetry myself. I like a lot of different kinds of poetry. I'm trying to think which one pops into my mind. That poem, it's fairly popular. People might know it. Do Not Stand by My Grave and Weep. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever heard of that? It's a beautiful poem. I remember some pieces of it. Let me think. Just a few lines. Do not stand by my grave and weep. I'm not there. I do not sleep.
Yep.
I'm 1,000 winds that blow. I'm the diamond glint on snow. I'm the sunlight on ripened grain. What's the next line? I'm the gentle autumn rain.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep. You're
Um,
exactly right so far.
yeah. Yeah. So it's a poem that I've had. I remember when I was in college and my grandmother passed, my mom asked me what I wanted to contribute, into the service. And that poem was what I wanted to share because I really believe it too. I really believe what she's talking about, that, don't go to my grave and cry. Like, I didn't die. I'm still everywhere. I have now just become a part of everything. That's part of my like spiritual beliefs. So I think it's beautiful, and it's beautiful to think about, especially when grieving. So yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good one. I mean, there are so many really touching ones about death and about grief. It's hard to pick a favorite, but that one's right. That one's right up there because it is. It's just saying like, don't stress. That's not me anymore. Which is what I tell like my kids and my family. Like, I don't care what you do with me after I'm gone because that's not me anymore.
Exactly.
So
that's not me.
You do whatever's cheapest, and then it's fine.
Yeah, my mom right now and my parents, they're in their 70s and they're talking about, do you kids want a gravesite? Like, should we be buried? Should we, they're thinking about all that. And I'm like, I feel bad saying it. I'm like, Mom, I won't visit you there. Like, I won't go there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's where you'll be. I'll talk to you every day. I'll find you in all kinds of ways, but I'm not gonna like go to a gravesite. That's just not in my faith. And there's nothing wrong if people find solace there. Of course, that's wonderful. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There are plenty of people. I've got a cousin who I know because she posts pictures all the time of her visiting her mother at her grave, and it's like that brings her comfort and that brings her that connection. But like I haven't visited my grandfather's grave since he died, and he died in late 2019 to breast cancer. And it's like, he's buried, first of all the way up in Oklahoma, and who wants to drive that far? But I still feel that connection with him all the time, not because I'm doing something like that. So it just depends on you as a person, and also kind of how convenient that is for you. But yeah, like whatever serves the people who are here is what I want for them.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever works for you.
Yeah.
Wherever you find that solace and that comfort, for sure.
Absolutely. So you're having all of this stress, and was that kind of the breaking point for you? Like, how did you finally say enough's enough? And what was it like for you to make that decision and then finally be like, I'm done?
Yeah. So it really was the second time I broke out in stress hives, not the first, but the second. And it was all over. It was in my gut. It started in my belly and went like spread outward from there, which again, it's like, that's your intuition. That's your gut. Like it's telling you need to listen. So the second time I broke out in stress hives, I was like, I kept saying like, I need to quit. I would tell, my friends this. I wouldn't tell my family. Anytime I talked to them, everything's great, on the phone. Loving life over here, living in the big city, acting like I was handling everything and everything was fine. But my friends knew, we were all stressed. Yeah. It was not an easy place to be. And I just felt like if I found another job, even, not just that if I quit that one, but even if I found another one, it would just prove that I couldn't make it, or I wasn't as smart as I was like pretending to be, or I wasn't, as brave as I should be, or as strong. And that's all. All that my own stuff in my head. No one else put that on me. But as luck would have it, what actually got me to be able to move home and still kind of keep on my mask is my sister finally got pregnant. And it was the first kid in our family. Aww. And I was like, I have to go home and be the best aunt ever to my new nephew. And so that was my excuse. I have to leave this job now. So that's what I told everybody, my family, it comes first. I have to move home, or towards home. And so I started the job search when I found out, and within 5 to 6 months, I had moved back home and had a different job that was doing similar work, but a different mission. The mission was geared around holistic health and wellness.
Mm.
It was focusing on wellness in particular, in a college setting. And I remember at the interview, they asked me, so how do you take care of yourself? Like, what do you do for fun outside of work? And this is a stressful job, so how do you manage that? And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, the fact they're even asking me this is a different job. This is definitely a different world. And I didn't know what to say because I wasn't taking care of myself for
Yeah.
years at that point. And I think I said something like, oh, I'll be closer to family and I'm excited for that, which was true. But yeah, so that was really, it was family that gave me my out. And
Mm-hmm.
I could still keep my mask on of I'm a strong, independent woman and I can handle anything. So it took a little while to break that one down. But I was
Yeah.
in a better environment with a better job, with much better work-life balance. I could finally start therapy again. I could finally, do things that I know I needed. So that was great.
Yeah. I mean, that takes strength even just to say like I don't want to do this to myself anymore. Like it might from an outside perspective look like failure, right? But you got to just say okay, I love that mug. Sorry. I got distracted by your coffee mug just then. That's really cool looking.
It's the Firebird Festival I told
Hey,
you I live
yeah.
in Phoenixville.
Uh-huh.
Have a really cool town in Phoenixville, and we have a Firebird Festival where they build like a 3-story phoenix out of wood, and then they burn it to the ground and have a
Oh my gosh.
huge bonfire, and it's a whole festival around it. It's awesome. It's in December around the winter solstice.
That is so cool.
Yes. It is the coolest thing. Yeah, it really is. So y'all should come out and visit. Come to Phoenixville.
Oh, I love that. That sounds like a lot of fun. That's awesome. I now I don't remember what I was saying, which is fine, but like it does. That takes a lot of just guts to say like I'm done here. I'm not going to
Mhm.
worry about what it looks like on the outside, which I know you said you were still worrying about a little bit, but you don't necessarily have to. Like comparing yourself to other people and saying like what are they going to think? To me,
Right.
that's one of the things that I've learned in my life is like you just have to not. You just have to
Yes,
not do that.
exactly. And it took me a little while longer to get to that point of being able to
Yeah.
say, like, I just don't care about these other people's opinions.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there yet. I moved out of there when I was 28
Mhm.
years old. So I was, still in my 20s, I was still fresh, I guess.
Yeah.
My 30s is when I really started to, yeah, let that go, let
Mhm.
go that pressure that we put on ourselves that we make believe in our head that other people are putting on us. Like, but they're not putting it on us. We're creating that, or at least I was creating that in my
Yeah.
head.
That's a good comparison of like 20s to 30s energy also because that's what it was for me. Like
Hmm.
20s I'm going to conquer the world. This is going to be
Hmm.
I'm going to be the best blah 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 blah, blah like all the things. And then now in my very late 30s, I'm like, yeah, fuck it.
No, it's true. It's like I wanted to climb this corporate ladder and I'm gonna,
Yeah.
do all this stuff. And now I'm like, corporate ladder? No, 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 no. I want to rest. I want vacation days.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is priority, not climbing a ladder.
Yeah.
But it
I
takes a
still
while. You have to get that. You have to work through that.
Yeah,
Everybody does a
exactly. I
little.
mean, I still have to have a very challenging I have to have a very challenging work environment or I get super bored, but that's more of like a keep me engaged kind of thing than
Yeah,
a I want to conquer the world. It's a don't get so bored that you take a nap in the middle of the day
yeah,
kind of thing. So
yes. I can relate to that too. Yes, I still want
yeah.
to be energized and motivated and doing
Yes.
something I'm passionate about, but I'm not so concerned about um, getting promotions, job title,
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. Just I used to care about that,
Hmm.
and I don't anymore.
Yeah. Yep.
it's
That's
it's
fair.
freeing, really.
It really is. Do you have a serial killer or a true crime story that fascinates you?
Um, Interesting. So, I do love, all the classic ones that are not true crime, but like Law and Order SVU and Criminal Minds.
Oh yeah.
Love Criminal Minds. Actually, when I was in DC, when I lived there, me and my roommate, we couldn't afford cable, but the Ion channel plays Criminal Minds marathons all day, every day. That's like all they would play. So that's all we would watch, and we loved it. But true crime, I think I really did get into Making of a Murderer when that was
Ooh,
happening.
that
What was
was a good
that? A
one.
couple years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, that
I
was,
really
I
did get into that one.
feel like that was pandemic time, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And the other true crime I got really into that I think we all did during the pandemic was Tiger King,
Yeah.
right? I was really into that one.
Those were
Did
at the same
he
time, I
kill
feel
people or
like.
not?
Or maybe
Yeah,
I just
it
watched
was.
them. Maybe I just watched them at the same time.
I did
Uh,
too. I did
yeah.
too. It was definitely the beginning of the pandemic. Like, what am I doing with my
Yes.
time?
Yes,
And that's what it was.
exactly. I mean, those are two good ones. First of all, I have never in my head, for whatever reason, put Tiger King into the true crime category, but it is. Like, now that you
Oh, it
say it that
is.
way, like, that is so very much true crime. I didn't consider it to be that, but as soon as you said it, it's like, no, that is exactly what it is. That's
We
great.
didn't think it didn't start out that way, right? We
Yeah,
just thought,
yeah.
but it turned into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it started off very much just entertainment and like WTF is on my TV right now. But everyone
Pretty
was
much.
watching it, so we had to be there watching it.
That's right. Everybody was talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Making a Murderer was fascinating. I mean, just the things that they can get away with in an interrogation and then
Hmm.
use as evidence. It's like, whether you think one person did it, another person did it, whatever. Like, it's a tragedy no matter what. But the
Certainly.
things that they showed in that documentary for me were eye-opening. Like, I did
Hmm.
not realize they could do. So I have, because of that show in particular, I have counseled my kids to say, like, if you're ever pulled out of class by a police officer, you're ever
Hmm.
anything, the only words out of your mouth I want to be are yes sir, no sir, or yes ma'am, no ma'am. I want my mommy, I want a lawyer. That's it.
Hmm.
That is all.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
It's crazy that you have to be that cautious,
yeah,
but you do. But you do
yeah,
need to be that cautious.
it's
Hmm.
insane. It's insane the things that they can just get away with. It's crazy. It's
Oh,
crazy,
Tyrion
Tyrion.
woke up.
I know. He's like, I'm awake. Well, that's crazy.
Said you're talking about big cats? What's up
Oh,
with big cats?
you are.
Yeah.
You are the biggest. You're the biggest cat, probably. The whole lockdown kind of seems like the same time. That's true. That is very true. Any lawyer anywhere will tell you not to talk to the cops, especially if you're innocent. Any defense lawyer, yes, yeah,
Yep.
absolutely,
Yep.
because they can do all kinds of stuff with the things that you say and twist it however they want to suit their narrative.
That's right.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, well, getting on to the topic for the night. Can you tell us a little bit more about your book and kind of what inspired you to write Fragile Thoughts, and how did you go about writing it and kind of making it happen?
Yeah. Okay, so I have always been a writer. Just it's always been a part of my life. Just, I've always had diaries as a kid and I've just always written. But the real inspiration for the book started around 2019 when I started a word of the year practice. So instead of, doing a New Year's resolution or whatever, I decided to do a word of the year. And I learned about this like long journaling process to develop and come up with your word of the year through another podcast called Yoga Girl Conversations from the Heart. Rachel Braffin runs that. And I was listening to the podcast and she would give it was like a 3-hour journaling exercise. She gave all these prompts to reflect on the past year, all these prompts to reflect on the next year. And by the time you're done, you come up with a word of the year. And so my word of the year in 2021 was healing. And this had to do with a lot of different things. We were still in the pandemic. There was a lot going on for everybody around that time, and other things going on with me. And one of my smaller goals that I'd written down was to read 5 books that year. I've always been a big writer and reader, but I hadn't done that in a little while. And I, So I'm like, I want to do that more. I want to read more like self-help, spiritual type books to help me in my own healing and like spiritual development. And after I wrote that down, literally like 3 days later, my yoga teacher called me as if I manifested it, because I believe I did. And she said, hey, during these COVID online times, would you want to run a book club online? I was thinking we could do that within the studio and
Wow.
help keep people connected. And, it sounds like your thing. What do you think? And I was like, yes, of course, I want to do that. And so it led to running this book club that we call a learning circle that you mentioned in my intro. And it's really like a self-study book club rather than talking about the characters of the book. We talk about our own lives using the themes from the book. And so not only did I read I think I read 19 books that year instead of 5, which was like crazy, but I also wrote most of the book as well. I was doing a lot of writing, a lot of processing of my own stuff. And it was extremely healing. And so that, book club, as in it, we would share about our own lives. And I started sharing some of the stories of my own life, and people were impacted by that in a positive way. And they encouraged me to share more. And it just evolved into wanting to publish these stories. And the process kind of this learning circle and how powerful it can be, which combines journaling, yoga-based practices, and the vulnerable sharing, right? Like the sharing of our stories with each other. And then, so in 2022, my word of the year that year was freedom. And it meant a few different things. It meant like freedom from not caring about what other people think of me, which we were just talking about. It also meant like financial freedom. There was a few things. But because it meant not caring about what other people think of me, I remember I put online, this is the year I will publish my memoir. And within a month, I had connections that were connecting me to people, and I found my publisher that way. So it was pretty serendipitous. It was pretty things just happened. And then once I found New Degree Press and was working with them, everything just flowed, and it just happened. It took about a year-ish. I had written so much of it as in my own journals, and then I had to turn my journals into an actual coherent book. So that took a lot of rewriting and editing. I worked with a great team there to do that. And so then it came out last year in 2023.
That's awesome.
It's wild to think about how that happened. It all just evolved,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really does sound like that's how it was meant to happen. I mean, you went from stating your intentions to having something kind of come to you, and then turning that into something else, and then pursuing it, and then putting a new thing out there. And it's just all of that is really great. And just the way that, that stuff can come to fruition, it's really great. There is cat hair floating everywhere in front of my face. I'm trying to pull it off as it floats into my eyes. He must have shaken. He must have just shaken his little body. But
no,
yeah,
that's exactly what it was. It was I was writing it down, and this is the power of writing. This is where I find, this is where even the book came from, is the power of writing, and how writing not only can help us heal, it can help us process what we need to process, and it can help us achieve or find whatever we're looking to find. So there's a real power in writing.
Yeah. And kind of the connections too. Just that's wonderful. I am on Goodreads, and I know that they have the reading challenge every year where you can sign up and say this is how many books I want to read, and I do that every year. I wish they had a way to say I want to read this many of this kind of book, because that's something, if they had subcategories, I think that would be brilliant to say okay, yeah, sure, I want to read 40 books again this year of nonfiction or of fiction, but I also want to read, I would set that bar real low for myself, 3 maybe 3 nonfiction books, because I am just a huge fiction lover. And so
I am too. It's harder to read nonfiction, but there are some books out there that are easier to read, when they're written in a way that's easier to read, because they're more like a story.
Yes.
but I read like Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth about, oh man, and it's good stuff. It's really awesome, but I'm like, I fall asleep reading it. It
Yeah.
takes me a long time to get through those books.
Yeah.
And he's brilliant. I'm not trying to knock him or his writing, but it's harder to read about, his theory on our soul's evolution, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just a little bit harder.
Yeah. It is. And
Yeah.
there are I really find it much easier, like you were saying, to read the ones that are written like a story, or ones that are broken into chunks where it's like, okay, you're gonna read
Yeah.
about this for 20 pages and then you're gonna move on to the next thing, because you can keep my attention for 20 pages.
Right.
And then if you can move on to the next thing, that's great. Well, yeah, I mean, it really sounds like it was meant to be, honestly. Like from what you're
Really.
saying. That sounds really good.
Yeah, the synchronicities, it just kept lining up. It just kept being easy.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I tell people the story about how I wrote this book and how it was easy. People are like, "What? Publishing a book is not easy."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "I know, but that's how it just happened. It was one thing after another. It just aligned and it felt like it made sense." And I mean, I still have a full-time job. It's like it all just happened. It just happened.
Yeah.
It's wild to think back on.
That's wonderful.
And that's how you're doing something that is meant to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Just following that path.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So there's a comment in the chat that says, I feel like you should be reading nonfiction like Freakonomics. And I agree. I agree with that. Good luck getting me to put down my other stuff to pick up another because I just finished a nonfiction one. Good luck getting me to pick up another one for like a month.
Which one did you just finish?
I just finished one. It's called Badass Stories. Hold on. Hold on. Because let me just go into my Goodreads so I can tell you the full title of it. Because it's like stories of grit and healing and growth. And let me get to my my red books, and I can tell you. Badass Stories: Grit, Growth, Hope, and Healing in the Shit Show.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, and that's by Jodi Huckleberry Hunt, and it was fantastic. Like, it was really, really good. And it's one of those that, first of all, is written with stories, and second of all, is written broken down in little chunks.
Yeah, little chunks. It's helpful.
Yeah, it's like, now you're going to read about grit. Great, you're done with that. Now you're going to read about growth. Great, you're done with that. So those little like dopamine hits along the way of, I'm done with that part. Yay.
For sure. Yeah.
So you wrote this book and it kind of came together from all of this work. So how did you weave together the writing and the storytelling and the yoga practices to create kind of a holistic approach to healing?
Yeah, so it is a memoir. So each kind of chapter is a story of my life. And I do focus on the tough stuff. So each chapter is kind of like one tough experience, but it ends with like the lesson learned from it.
Yeah.
And how I used writing or these other healing tools to find the lesson in it and to find the healing in it. And so at the end of every chapter, there are journal prompts and one yoga-based activity for readers to find their own healing.
Oh, I love
and that's
that.
really how, thank you. And that's how the learning circles were run, right? So we'd read a book and then we'd use the author's stories as like the jumping off point to consider our own lives. And we'd have a share circle, and that vulnerability is really powerful, right? So in the share circle, everybody would be, sharing something that's significant to them, and they'd hear, I'm here with you, or me too, I can relate, and all of that is so powerful. And then, we do deep breathing, we do meditation, we do journaling in that group. And it was that combination of all of these things that really like supercharged all of our healing. Like everyone in that initial group will tell you, I didn't know any of them. I knew one person who was an acquaintance from work. The rest of the group were all strangers to me. And some of them are now like my best friends years later, right? It was truly powerful, and it was transformational for all of us in that group, in that initial group. So Yeah, so that's kind of how it goes. It's like something difficult, the lesson learned in it, and then 5 questions and 1 activity to do on your own. And that's how the whole book goes.
Okay, fine. I'll read that one next.
And I tell you, it does read like a story. One of the biggest feedback I keep getting from friends, family, and people I know that have read it is that like people read it in a couple hours. Like it's not a long book, and especially if you like skip the journals and the yoga based activities and you just read the story, you could read it in 2 or 3 hours, like easily. So a lot of people do that, and then they go back and like work through the journals and do that kind of thing. Or I know some people also did the journals throughout, but then of course now that takes you a lot longer, right? Because you're really like processing as you go. So yeah, there's different ways to kind of do it based on your own preference.
Yeah, I love that. I'm all for journaling if it's like a specific prompt, and kind of you can take it and it's got a purpose. I have a tendency, and I work with my own therapist on this, but I have a tendency to write stuff down and then revisit it later whenever I'm upset or something. Like I'll write it when I'm upset and revisit it. So if I journal without a prompt, it's something that I'm going to have to tear up and throw away at the end, or I'll just go back and read it later and it'll bring up all the same. So that's different. But journaling to say like, here's this information, I'm going to, really target it towards what I'm supposed to be doing. I think that that's a different kind of journaling that I really do enjoy. I think that that's, it can help you really think through what you've just read. Because, sometimes you read and it's like, okay, I just read that. And then for me, like 3 seconds later, for some people, like 3 days later, they're like, what did I read?
And I think too, it's like, writing, it gets everything that's all jumbled in our heads and can like, when we put it on paper, at least for me, when I put it on paper, I can see it more clearly. It's a discernment process, being able to put it on paper and not just yes, like just writing my emotions of what I'm mad about or what's happening can be cathartic. That's typically not the most common that I do, right? I find a lot of targeted prompts like you're talking about, or specific strategies that I've done over the years that have been more helpful than just like the diary type. I've always had diaries as a kid and teenager and stuff. And so that's what actually is really helpful about diary type, just writing about what happens in your life and how you feel about it, is I had all these journals in my basement. Like I had a tub of like journals from being a kid and teenager years that I've kept. And when I was writing this book, I would go in my basement to find something. Like I was writing about when I was 12 and a friend of mine died. And it was a really tough time. And I was like, let me go find my journals from when Jerry died. And wow, I was seeing, of course it brought back all the memories, but it brought the emotion. So then when I wrote about it in the book, it was, right from my journals, really. So it's pretty cool to look back on it in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would not want to look back on my teenager diaries, which I feel like I did keep a diary, but also not for very long because then I had siblings who would try to like find it and stuff. So there was that too.
Yep.
I tried to find theirs, so
it happens. Siblings,
I like this encouragement in chat, like, hey, there's all three. Just you've read one, then read Freakonomics, and then read this one. and you're practically done already. That's wonderful. I like writing because talking out loud to myself tends to be frowned upon. I just talk to myself out loud.
I do too. I talk to myself all the time.
Yeah. Although mostly I sing to myself, and the other day my 10-year-old tried to have a very serious conversation with me about, why do you sing so much? Why do you sing so many songs? I was like, babe, you're not going to understand it at all. And then the very next day, he bust out into song about something. I was like, haha, you're getting it too.
That's so funny. He's taken on your, characteristic of singing.
He is. It's a family, I was going to say a family curse, but it's like a family blessing, I think.
Yeah.
He thinks it's a curse right now. So I think you've already kind of talked about this a little bit, but I want to get to kind of the, direct answer of how did
Hmm.
writing serve as a healing tool in your own life? And if someone
Right.
were listening to this and saying, I would love to explore writing as a form of
Hmm.
self-expression and healing, what would be your advice to them if they're just starting out?
Yeah. Yeah. So writing had been a part of my whole life because I actually had a speech impediment as a kid. And so it was hard for people to understand me. And people would always ask me to repeat myself. I had to go to speech therapy until I was in sixth grade. And so people made fun of me, other kids are mean, of course. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to talk when I was a kid. Now you kind of can't shut me up. But when I was a kid, I didn't want to talk. And so writing was just what I did all the time. And it was a way to communicate. I wrote notes to my friends in school instead of talking to them in class. And over time, I learned that there's so many ways to journal, right? Like I talked about the diaries where I would just write my feelings or thoughts or my what happened to me that day. And as I was saying, when you put that on paper, it gets really objective, right? You can look back on it and you can start to find connections. And what happened when I was writing my book and writing my stories, even before I knew I was going to publish them, what I learned was like when I would write the story, more would come that I didn't even know. Thinking about it, more would come out, and I don't know why that is. I don't know why when you start writing, you find things that maybe your brain just can't find when you're just thinking about it. I don't know why, but that's what happened to me. And so I would also start to make these connections between events or experiences,
Hmm.
right? Like, you know, I would realize that, this is connected to that, or, oh, maybe, I keep saying the same thing over and over again as it relates to this. Like, maybe there's something there. And I would just like discover more things when writing versus just thinking about them. Um, and like, there's so many more ways to journal than just like dumping all your thoughts out. Um, there was a few strategies that my therapist like 20 years ago gave me that I've been using like for the past 20 years. And some of them are things like writing your stories in third person. It helps you become even
Mm.
more objective about it. And it can help you figure out, like, especially if there's shame tied to your story or to some situation that you're a part of, we feel shame because we feel that we did something wrong or we are to blame. And when we put it in third person, you can start to see that, of course, you wouldn't blame that person. They're the
Yeah.
victim in the situation or whatever, the situation is. And so the third person objectivity really helped me. And
Hmm.
also rewriting parts that you don't like. Change it, write a story, right? And change it into a happy ending and see what that feels like. Or change the things that you couldn't control, right, in real life, but pretend you had control. What would you change? Write it differently. And that was a therapeutic, idea that my therapist gave me and I would bring back to therapy and we'd talk about. And that really helped because it really, again, it helped remove the blame and the shame from the equation. Because I started to see like, oh, I really was doing what I needed to do to survive in those situations.
Hmm.
Or there was a reason, right? Like, and I didn't know that like logically. I had to write it out in this story form, at least for me, to see that. So that's one kind of method I would suggest. Another method would be like sentence stems to just see where it takes you. So you start a sentence, I want, I need, whatever, but do it like 5, 7, 10 times. Write I want and then finish the sentence. And then write again, I want, finish it a different way. I want, finish it a different way. And you start to really dig deeper to find out not just the surface level thoughts, you see what comes deeper when say, I'm going to write this 10 times and
Hmm.
see what happens. And it's not just I want or I need, it could be, you know, I need forgiveness of, or I want to forgive. It could be literally anything at all. I'm grateful for. That's always a great one, right? Gratitude writing is always helpful to reframe our brain. Um, but yeah, I think even writing letters to people is another great
Hmm.
strategy. Writing a letter to your younger self, your future self, to people you care about, people you're mad at, people you can't stand, people that hurt you. Um, Write a letter to God. whoever your higher power is. Like, there's the letter writing process is really powerful. And if anyone follows Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Big Magic or Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert, she's a phenomenal writer, and she is on Substack right now doing letters from love, and she encourages the journal prompt every week. If love was going to write you a letter, what would they say? And then there's like slightly different prompts each week. But she has a great journaling community that I would also recommend to look into, because they'll have many more prompts and ways to, techniques to look into as well. Yeah, so those are just a few.
Yeah, I mean, I really love some of these techniques. Like it feels like it is really getting to, first of all, getting to know yourself a little bit, but also like scratching the itch in your brain to just say like, okay, get it out and get it all the way out. Because you're right, like we can have 100 thoughts, and as everyone already knows, and as you can likely already tell, I get distracted mid-sentence all the time. And so because I just like go off on these tangents, I might not finish a single thought for 10 full minutes. It might be 10 full minutes of no actual thinking happening. But if you're journaling, it kind of keeps you on task to say, no, finish that thought, like get it out there, get it down on that paper. And I'm sure for plenty of people that is super, super helpful. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, you kind of get to the core, you get deeper.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times too, it's a coping strategy to not allow yourself to sit with yourself and to really think about some of these things.
Yeah.
And so this kind of, gently encourages you to sit with yourself truly for a little bit and think about whatever, your stories are, whatever your experiences are that maybe you want to learn more about or dig more into.
Yeah, I like that. And then there's a couple of comments in the chat that I want to make sure to read. First of all, Bite Mark says, hey, fellow speech therapy goer.
Hi.
I forgot that you went to speech therapy, Bite. I totally forgot. That about you. So, and then she also says, writing letters to people and not sending them because I deserve to speak my truth, but other people don't necessarily deserve to hear it. Ooh.
That's so true. Yeah, I definitely don't recommend sending those letters. No. Keeping them, burning them, anything like that would be.
Well, that's why I have to rip things up and throw them away, because I am too tempted to send them. If I'm writing an email or if I'm writing a letter, like I'm tempted to just be like, you know what? I said what I needed to say. You need to sit down and read it. I got one for you, Mama, and you're gonna hate it. Do I feel 10 times? Yeah, I don't like that already.
Yes.
I already don't like that.
That's it. Whoever said that, you're onto it right there.
Yeah, and you're right. I would hate that. I'm surprised my therapist hasn't made me do that one. Like we've had lots of feeling talks and everything, but never that particular like 10 times writing prompt kind of thing. I'm surprised she hasn't done that, and now with my luck she probably will.
We are manifesting it for you.
We are manifesting it for me. No, you may not get my therapist number. Absolutely not. So if someone is kind of listening to this, like where would you recommend that they start? Is there a good website or something that they could get specific prompts from? Is it something like joining your Substack? Is that a good place to start, or what's out there?
Yeah. So Elizabeth Gilbert would be one great place. Buying my book would be another great place. But yeah, I think there's so many, you could just Google. I mean, there's so many free available resources around this that you can easily find very accessible resources around journaling prompts for healing. If you put that in, I know I've searched that plenty of times and have found things. I do think, so I started a Substack, and in the Substack, it's new to me. It's not something I'm super familiar with, but it's kind of funny. My word of the year for 2024 was playful, and I wanted to really get back to the joy of life, of writing, because I did spend so much time like writing to publish, and that it drained me a little bit.
Turned it into a job.
Yeah, it really did. And I had like set meetings with the editors, and it And after I like submitted it and was done, I didn't write a single word, not even to journal for myself for a solid 8 to 9 months. I was just like done. I
Wow.
had all the words. There were no more words in me. But I wanted to come back to the joy of writing because I love to write. And so I started a Substack and I learned about the community because I wrote my word playful. And literally 2 weeks later, I met somebody through a friend. Her name's Kate Brenton. She's another great resource. She runs Sit and Write. It's a group on Substacks called Sit and Write. And I met her actually through a yoga class. And then at the yoga class, at the end of it, the teacher was like, I really think people need to connect better. And so I think everyone should introduce themselves and tell each other what you're working on, because I think there's people here that need to meet. Okay. So I was like, I'm Katie Bean, and I'm all about healing through writing. And she's like, my name's Kate Brenton, and I'm all about healing through writing. I was like, it was kind of crazy. And she's like, yeah, I have the Substack. So anyway, it's just, again, the serendipity behind all of this stuff is just wild to me. So I started a Substack per her suggestion. And so that community, it's totally free. It's a great resource for writers, for readers, a lot of great stuff there. I put out a newsletter once a week on Sundays, and it'll have just a topic, whatever's on my mind, and then a few journal prompts that are based on that theme. So follow along. There could be stuff there, but I'd also suggest, I said Elizabeth Gilbert already. I would definitely suggest her as well because she's fabulous and has a lot of great journaling prompts. Yeah, and those are the ones that come to mind. I'm sure there's more, but like I said, even just Googling, you'll find so many great free resources around that. There's tons of journals you could buy, but also, yeah, you can find it for free. And just see what comes up for you. Just start writing. That stream of consciousness writing is also a useful one. So just writing whatever comes to you and seeing what happens could be helpful too.
Do you recommend writing by hand or typing more?
It's a good question. I think there's a real benefit of writing by hand, holding the pen and the paper, getting it out on the page, but also there's benefit in being able to, if you're a really fast thinker and you can't write as fast as your brain moves, then typing is really better for you because you're going to be able to get more thoughts out, and that's better. If you have pain, if you can't write very long, then of course typing is better. I've done both. I've written so many journals. I have full, like I said, still in my basement from all those years, but I have like 5 or 6 at my nightstand table right now. But I still type all the time too. So I don't know. I do a mix of both. Whatever is your preference.
Yeah. Hey, and that's exactly it, right? I mean, I feel like with a lot of things related to mental health, like you take what serves you and you leave the rest. If it's not working for you, you just leave it. You don't have to do everything that someone says worked for them because it might not work for you. And so if you prefer to write, get some pretty gel pens, some colors, some glitter pens. I mean, hell, whatever you want, or 12 different shades of black pens, whatever you want, whatever floats your boat. Or type. Like I type way faster than I can write down. Absolutely. So I can get a lot more done if I'm typing. Now I want to take a minute because I don't know what it is. What is Substack exactly?
Oh yeah. No, that's a great question. It's newer to me too, so I did not know as of just a couple months ago. It is an online website or an app. You can download the app as well. It is free. And everybody who's on there, it's not a social media. And they even say all the time, the people that are on it are like, we're not letting this be social media. It is for writers to post a newsletter, and that's what you can sign up for. So you subscribe to whoever you want. Oh. Some people do charge. So, the big people, like big famous people who can, you know what I mean? They might charge. They'll offer free content, and then it'll be like, if you want to see the rest, pay X amount. And that's how people make a living. So that's cool. But there's so much free content on there as well. And it's all kinds of whatever. It's photography, it's creatives. There's photography, there's so many writers for so many different kinds of things. And you can find whatever your interests are. And then you can subscribe and you'll get their newsletters, and it'll just compile them if you're on the app, and it'll say under each one, 4-minute read, 8-minute read, whatever it is. There's also, they just added audio very recently. And so some people have added audio or podcast type sounds. And yeah, I'm still learning it. So that's as far as I know too.
Do people like comment on it or collaborate on it or anything like that?
Absolutely. You can comment on people's, newsletters or posts. Absolutely. And you can restack them, they call it. So if you read something that you think is really cool, you can restack it. And it'll show up in other people's feeds. Yeah.
That's cool. That's neat. I like that.
It builds a community. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we're talking about journaling, but then there's also the vulnerable storytelling side of it. So sometimes you can journal and you just journal for yourself and that's all you do. But storytelling implies really sharing it with other people. So what do you believe the benefits of vulnerable stories are for both the storyteller and the audience?
Right. Both people definitely benefit. It's to know that we're not alone, right? I think one of our biggest fears in life for all humans is that we're alone, that we are like one and only experiencing this thing, whatever this thing is. And so for the one who's sharing, they're opening themselves up for others to see. And it's hard. It's brave to do that. And when they hear someone say, like, I'm here with you, thanks for sharing, like that meant something to me, or, the really powerful, me too, I can relate in this or that way, they know they're not alone. And that's so powerful. And for the listeners, who are kind of blessed with this vulnerability, they get to get that same benefit without having to expose themselves. And really, when you think about it, it's shame, right, that keeps people from not sharing. And shame, it grows in the dark. It's you need to expose it to the light. Like you need to, shine that flashlight right on it, because shame like shrinks into the shadows. And, you got to put as much light on it as you can. And when you do that, you can be a beacon then, for others. And that's what I think is really powerful about sharing our stories. I've gotten nonstop response from people saying, I can relate to that. I can relate to that. And it's so rewarding for me to know, from small things to big things, that I put in the book, it's all based on the same shit that we all deal with. It's like the same fears, the same worries. Maybe we all didn't have a speech impediment, though people can relate, right? Like there are some people who feel that way. Whether you had that or not, you got made fun of as a kid at some point. We all did, right? And so the base fears that are in like everybody's stories is what connects us. It's what, keeps us together. So yeah, I think when we can open up ourselves and be someone, we can be that beacon of light for somebody else to kind of find their way. And that's the real benefit of it. Definitely, though, both people benefit.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And this goes back to what I always talk about, which is when I started sharing my own story and my own things that I was going through, really was when I was experiencing postpartum depression with my second kiddo. And I, for whatever reason, let slip one day at work. I think maybe my coworker saw me take a pill or something. And because at that point, my OB had already said, like, hey, you're depressed as fuck and you need to go see someone about it. And so I did. And I got on a medication that was compatible with breastfeeding and all that good stuff. And I let slip at work, like, this is something that I'm struggling with. And she immediately was like, oh, yeah. Yeah. I was like, what do you mean? Oh, yeah. So talking about things openly for me has been really rewarding, just in knowing that I'm not alone. But then you are letting other people know that they're not alone either, because someone else is experiencing kind of the same thing. So yeah, I think that's exactly a real benefit. We did have a great community question that was sent in ahead of time. They requested anonymous, so I won't share who it was. But this person says, how do you recommend we navigate the fine line between being vulnerable and maintaining healthy boundaries, especially in public or online spaces? And I think that's a wonderful question.
Yes. It is a wonderful question because it's really important that we are, taking care of ourselves and having like
Yeah.
this question asked healthy boundaries and just making sure that we feel safe and comfortable with whatever we are choosing to share. That's so important. Yes, and especially in public or online, right? This is a scary thing. And I'll be honest, I did not share everything in my book.
Yeah.
I left things out, right? Like I did not share every detail of things. I had a whole chapter. This is funny, I'm going to say this out loud. I had a whole chapter on like my sex life in high school
Mm-hmm.
and all the trauma that was associated with that. And I was like, I don't need this chapter in here. Nobody needs to see this. And I took the
Yeah.
whole thing out. So that chapter is not even in there. But, and then there's other things too that I didn't have, you don't have to put everything in. It's calculated vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
It's not share every single thing. And I think that's important. I think, when in the learning circles I run, we talk about cultivating courage, compassion, and connection. And that's what vulnerable sharing does. And that's those three things that comes from Brene Brown, another fantastic author that people should look into if they don't already know her and her work. But she says to live a wholehearted life, you have to have courage, compassion, and connection. And it's sometimes what I say when I do my little intro about courage and what courage means. Sometimes courage is not sharing. Sometimes courage looks like listening with an open heart and hearing what other people are saying. Sometimes we're not ready to share, and that's okay. Like sometimes sharing harms us and harms others if we're not ready to share. Like you need to feel safe. You need to be in a space that is safe. And if it's online or in public, do you really know if it's safe? Maybe, depending on the circumstance, maybe not. So understanding, I think, a way to understand is it safe is understanding our own reasons for doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're sharing because it's cathartic, that's maybe not that. Maybe that's not the best because that's not always super helpful. Are we sharing because we learned something and we want to share the learning? Did we find a purpose within it? We want to share the purpose. Do we want to help others, basically? I think if that's where we're at in our minds about the situation, then we're in a place that we're ready to share. Because we've kind of come to this, again, it's like an objective place around it. And I think, your mission, destigmatizing mental health, we have the same mission. We want to help people heal, right? And if people are sharing just out of their own desperation or their own, what's another word for that? Their own need for attention, their own need for people to validate them, that's not a very safe and healthy thing for you or the person hearing it. But if you already feel, safe and you have worked with your therapist or you've done the journaling or you've done the whatever, then in a public or online space now, because that's what we're talking about. I'm not talking about not opening up to your best friend or within a small group of your people. Of course, do that when you need the catharsis of talking to your friends, like, of course. But when it's public or online, I think you need to be in a place where it's helpful to others. And so, I think you need to be ready to share it. And that means seeing the lessons and understanding the impact that it could have. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's a really good point because it can be, I think, really hard to tell. Am I doing this, like you're saying, with a purpose? Am I doing this for attention? Which there's nothing wrong with wanting attention.
Of course.
Am I doing this in a way that's going to be healthy? Or am I doing this in a way that could be hurtful to myself or other people? And kind of really digging in and answering those questions takes effort and it takes time. Like people already know my story. They know how I got here. And so it's really clear to see, like, I have a reason that I do this.
Yes.
But not everyone is going to have that immediate, like, oh shit, realization that something needs to be done and that something needs to happen and that you want to be a part of that. Sometimes it's going to take, quite a bit of time to even consider sharing something online, and whether or not you should is part of that. But it's a really personal thing. I don't think anyone should tell you you must share your story with other people.
No,
Like that's
no.
not something that I think that anyone would recommend.
No, I
Not
would not.
anyone worthwhile anyway.
Absolutely. No, and I work with students on my college campus who are in recovery from mental or behavioral health
Mhm.
conditions. And we often have speak outs or events where we have panelists of students talking about their story. And I talk at length with my students, like, do you feel ready? You know, because they'll say, I want to share. And I'm like, you are 3 weeks sober. Let's talk about this, you know, or whatever the thing is, right? Everybody's
Yeah.
different. But there's power in small groups. That's why, you know, for that example of that student, it's like, yes, go to a meeting. Like, let's get you sharing your story with people who understand you in the safe container.
Hmm.
But putting you on a panel to talk to just all students, like, no. You know, we need to like gradually get you there.
Yeah.
Um, when you feel ready, and because some people are going to have comments that you might not want to hear,
Hmm.
right? You have to be ready for that if we're talking about public or online or those
Yeah.
kinds of things. And I'm in a place where I'm very comfortable if people say whatever they say. I'm at a place where I'm like, I'm good. You could say whatever you want to say, you know. So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a place where it's okay. And I'm truly just here to hope that others can find something of value, hope that
Hmm.
it can help them on their own path. If it doesn't, you know, take what you like, leave the rest, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. And I mean, people online can be really brutal, and you got to be
Yes.
aware of that too. So like if you're going to share, if you're going to put yourself in that open, vulnerable position, like be
Hmm.
prepared that the internet is full of dickheads and it can't necessarily be helped all the time. So just like steel yourself a little bit, because it's
Yeah.
no matter how good your intentions are, no matter how touching and real and honest and raw your story is,
Hmm.
someone's going to make a shitty comment, and you just have to
Hmm.
you have to be able to say
Yeah.
like, okay, go off, whatever.
Yeah. You have to be okay with that. Like, you have to be
Yeah.
solid and sturdy in your
Yeah.
own healing, you know,
And I love
especially
the
online. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea with kind of starting with a small group and saying like,
Yeah.
if it's something like an AA group or whatever it is that you're going through, there's trauma survivor groups and all kinds of things,
Absolutely.
for anything that you need. And having that small group of people who understands
Hmm.
what you're going through, maybe that's enough of a,
Hmm.
I feel better getting this off my chest.
Hmm.
Um, that then you don't have to go online where there are going to be people.
Trolls. Trolls, you know?
Trolls.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was a
No, I
great
think it's
question.
important to find your group. Yeah, that's a very
Yeah.
valid question. Very
Yep.
needed.
Absolutely. So we've talked about journaling, we talked about vulnerable storytelling. So can you talk a little bit about yoga and how that can be beneficial for mental health and emotional well-being, especially if you're struggling with something?
Ah, yoga. Yes. So, writing was always a part of my life. Vulnerability was in and out of my life for a long, long time. Both were very healing. When yoga came into my life, it is as if all this healing just sped up. It was supercharged.
Yeah.
It really was. And so, you know, I think a lot of people, when they hear yoga, they think about just the physical practice of doing tree pose or like warrior pose, whatever. Cool. That's a part of it. Yes. But there is such a deep, rich wisdom from like the ancient sages about yoga that is what I'm really talking about.
Yeah.
So, you know, even in my book where like each chapter has a yoga based activity, it's not really anything movement based. It's like a meditation. It's different things like that. And so, um, I always like to tell people who are new to yoga this, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, written over 2,000 years ago. It's kind of like the main book. You know, I'm a yoga teacher too. All the yoga teachers have to read it. It's one of the main books. And in Yoga Sutra 1.2, so it's the second line in the book, it says, the purpose of yoga is to still the fluctuations of the mind.
Hmm.
That is the purpose of yoga. It is not
I did
about
not know that.
physical postures. I know. A lot of people don't know that. And so the whole idea is like when you're on the yoga mat, it's practicing self-reflection. It's figuring out what's happening in your mind when you're doing challenging things. And it's learning, practicing in that moment for life off the mat. That's literally what it's about. So, you know, my yoga teacher, Kate Goodyear is her name. When I found her as my teacher and I was learning more the spiritual side and the mental health side of yoga, because of course I got into yoga through physical stuff, right? Like I found a Groupon, yoga's expensive. I found a Groupon, went to a few places. It was all about just like a workout, like a physical workout. And that was fine, like, you know, for being a workout. But then when I found my teacher and she talked about things like breath control, all of these postures are actually breath control. We're trying to control our breath in all these postures. And I'm like, oh, that's deeper than, you know, just hold the pose or whatever. And she would, you know, all these lessons, they started small and maybe obvious, but things like keep your eyes on your own mat. You cannot look outside of you shouldn't look outside of your mat because you're you and you can't like try to do what they're doing over there. They got a different body and they got different experiences. So you're never going to look the same. And that's a great lesson for life, right? And really it's about paying attention to the mind. Like, where does the mind go when you're doing something challenging? You know, does it say, you can't do this? You're fat and ugly and stupid, because that's what my brain tells me a lot of times. I got to change that pattern. And on the mat is practice, changing the mental patterns so that when I am in a challenging pose, I can start to change my thought process. That way, when I'm off the mat and I'm in a challenging life situation, I can have a better thought process. That's really what yoga's about. So that's like, it's like the mind-blowing part of yoga, that when I have started learning these things, it really sped up my healing journey big time. Big time. And yeah, I'll stop there because I could talk about this for another 3 hours. So I'll stop right there.
I'm here for it. Like so I enjoy yoga and I really enjoy it for kind of the stretching and the breath control. Like I like those kinds of things and they suit me well. I just do it like in my house. But long time ago, when I actually went out to the gym and all that good stuff, there was a great yoga class that I took, but it was very, very focused on the physical. So how many yoga classes really focus into that level? Because very limited experience with actual yoga classes. So how rare, I guess, is it for a teacher to focus like that?
No, you're absolutely right, because I probably went to easily a dozen different studios with different teachers before I found my teacher. And yeah, so it's not the most common, unfortunately. It's, you know, to try to find a traditional, you would look for these words in their kind of mission or blurb online: traditional, spiritual, like literally the tagline for the studio I go to is, we're more than just poses.
Oh,
so that's like
that.
pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're out there. They're definitely out there. And they're online, and you can find even free YouTube videos at home. Trauma informed is another word that might help you find some classes or people, you know, teachers who are using that kind of perspective, the traditional perspective. I mean, yeah, I have been to teachers classes where they're just move your body this way, then this way, then this way. And like, that's good and fine if you want to work out. Like, that's great if that's what you're looking for, not knocking that. But for me, it's like, it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
And it's much more spiritual practice than anything. And so that's what I look for. So classes that have a long Dharma talk in the beginning, which is basically giving some kind of lesson, and then throughout the class, they're bringing it up again each time you're doing a pose or moving through a sequence. They're reminding you of that lesson that they were teaching in the beginning. And that, I mean, that's just so healing.
I really like that. I mean, so I took mine in a gym that I was already a member of. It just happened to be at the time. Normally I would do the kickboxing class, but it was a different day and it was a yoga class. I was like, I'll try it. And then I wound up going to that yoga class several times. So, I mean, it's not surprising that it was very, very focused on the physical aspect of it, given the setting. I wonder, I'll have to look and see if there are any yoga studios down here that are specific to that. I live in a pretty small farm town, so online might be my only
Yeah, it might
option.
be hard.
But
It might be
but
hard.
but I'll
'Cause
have
it's
to I'll have
not
to
the
look
most
into that.
common thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
I don't know. We've got some cool things. There's a really cool like bookshop, coffee shop kind of vibe down here in some areas. So I'll have to see if there's anything and give it another try maybe. Because I like that. I like the pulling in the practices that really go beyond the physical. I think that that's something
Yeah.
that could be very beneficial because look, I've been healing from many, many things, and I think I will probably
Hmm.
always be healing from many, many
Hmm.
things, and that's okay. Like it's not that I'm not healed about some stuff, but there's just always
Hmm.
things you can do. So,
Always things. Yeah. And yoga is really a mind, body, and spirit connection. It's, a holistic practice, truly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I like that. It's been quite a while, but I used to do like a 10-minute yoga stretchy thing to the Marconi Union waitlist track, which was studied and proven to be relaxing and anxiety reducing. The beat of it slows, so doing poses by the counts and breathing with them slows your breathing automatically. I love that.
Nice.
And fun fact, fun facts with Mama here. For some reason, every time I see that Marconi Union, I have to really focus on saying that because when I glance at it, I see macaroni unicorn. When it's written every time, I glance over there and I'm like, oh yeah, that macaroni unicorn song, Weightless. I don't know why. That's just what my brain does to that Marconi Union, not macaroni unicorn.
You're cracking me up.
I don't know why it's that. So, for someone who is just beginning their healing journey, are there any practical tips or just simple exercises you would recommend, whether that's yoga or journaling or storytelling or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it would be all three of those things for
Mhm.
sure, right? Yoga would definitely be one. Again, trauma informed or traditional yoga teachers. Um, Breath work, meditation. I think it feels really heavy to be like a meditation practice. It feels like a big deal. I don't know. At
Yeah.
least to me, when I first started, it's like, oh, meditation, it feels like a big deal. But all meditation is sitting down and trying to not think of anything. I know that that's people say like try to just not think or like calm your thoughts. Like that's impossible. Your brain is constantly active and your mind moves and thinks of things. That's doing its job. That's what it's supposed to do. And it's just paying attention. It's just noticing what's happening in the brain and in the mind and what thoughts are coming or excuse me, what physical sensations you're feeling. It's just like noticing them and paying attention. And I remember I was listening to this I guess it was a podcast, maybe it was a YouTube video or something, with Ram, excuse me, with Ram Dass, a yoga teacher, and he was saying, that someone came to him and was like, I can't meditate. I tried, I can't. And he's like, well, what did you do? And they're like, oh, well, I sat down and I just tried to focus on my breathing, but my mind kept going. So I kept focusing on my breathing, but my mind kept going. So I can't meditate. And he was like, you just described meditating. Like you're an expert practitioner. If you sit down and your mind goes someplace and you try to refocus, it's literally it. You're doing it.
Yeah.
And that really hit me. I was like, yes. So I think it's a lot easier than people, easier. It's not easy. I think it's a lot simpler than people think it is. And to just really give yourself 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, whatever you can, to just pay attention to what's happening in the mind.
Mhm.
Um, you could try to control everything in your life, which I know we all try to do, right? You can't control anything. You can't control anything except your thoughts. It's the only thing you can try to have some awareness and control over, and it makes a world of difference. So I would suggest, yeah, starting with breath work, meditation, just trying to be aware. And breath work, really, just taking deep breaths, it's so powerful. Like just taking 3 really long, deep breaths activates the parasympathetic nervous system, allows your whole body to relax. And so really just sitting and breathing is powerful. And it doesn't even have to be while sitting, right? While doing the dishes, while whatever you're doing, while driving your car, you can take deep breaths and focus on,
Yeah.
your own self-awareness of your breath. And that's a really powerful practice. That alone has changed my life. I mean, not trying to be overly dramatic about it, but it really has. It really has, just paying attention to that breath. And, you know, in yoga classes, my teacher will say, like, if you're in a pose, like, the breath is the guide. She'll say that all the time. The breath is the real teacher. So, like, if you're in a pose or a posture or something and you find yourself holding your breath, you've gone too far. Listen to that. It's telling you to change or back out or whatever. And so if you find yourself holding your breath, or if you find yourself with breath that's short or shallow, you know, then that indicates you need to change something. And that practice on the mat of being aware of that in real life, if you find yourself holding your breath, if you find yourself short and shallow breathing, oh my gosh, this is telling you that you're in a situation or something is happening that's not okay, that you need to change. You know, if I would have known that when I was living in DC, right? I spent years holding my breath, I felt like. So breath work, I would really start there, you know, and with all of these things together, whatever works for you.
There's a great podcast. I'll have to look up I think it's called like Meditation Minis. Hold on. Let me see if that's the right one. But it's great. Yes, this is the right one. What is her name? She says it every time and I can't remember what it is. But it's wonderful. It's this lady. She's got a Shell Hamilton. I don't know why I can't remember her name. It's great. She's got a great voice and they're really short. And we used to do them when my 17-year-old was not driving himself. I would drive all my kids to school and we would do a meditation mini on the way to school. And so they're very short. There's some that are like 3 minutes or some that are like 10 minutes. And it's guided. It talks you through breath and everything. Because I have the same, you know, that person who's like, I just my brain keeps going and I kept trying to focus on my breath. Like that's me. My brain just doesn't stop. So if I have something guiding me, it's much easier for me to say like, okay, I'm supposed to do this. And now I'm thinking about that and I'm supposed to do this. And I'm going to bring myself to doing this. And those short ones, if you are, even if you've never enjoyed meditation, I highly recommend that podcast because it's so nice. It's just, she's got a great voice. It's wonderful. And you can still do them while driving.
Right. And that's
not that I recommend
like, you can do it
but
anywhere, anytime. Like it doesn't, and that's why it's the most accessible self-care strategy, truly, because it's free. It's everywhere you are.
Yeah.
And everyone can do it. Like, just breathe. You know what I mean? Focus on your breathing. Focus on your breathing. Take deep breaths. So no matter where you are, you could do that one.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Now, you talked about your learning circle a little bit. Are there any books that have come out of that you would recommend for folks who are on a healing journey, or
oh my gosh,
you know, how does that learning circle really dig into your mission and help with connection and healing?
Yeah. So I'll start with the first of that question first.
Yeah.
So there are so many books. I mean, we could be on here for days, but I will just pick like my top 3. The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. If you have not read this book, it is short. It is totally manageable. She tells stories throughout, so it's not difficult to read. But it's all about learning life's lessons and turning difficult situations into, you know, learning opportunities and having a growth mindset. And it is fabulous and so helpful. And I've been giving it to every student that graduates that I work with, you know, my group. I've been giving it as the senior gift for like 15 years now. It's like, it is the book.
I like that. That's awesome.
When people ask me for one book, like that's usually the one that I'm like, this is the one that you should read. So that one for sure. But another one that I read more recently, because that one came out years and years ago. More recently, there's a book called Burnout. What's the subtitle? Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Nagoski twins, Amelia and Emily. And oh, wow, this book. I so recommend it. They have pop culture references throughout. It's so fun to read. But it's science-based. They're going to talk to you about what happens in the brain, what is stress, what is the body doing when it's stressed, how to how to stop the stress cycle, like biologically. And this book actually, not exaggerating, changed the way I live my day-to-day life, because I realized they give you like specific strategies. I actually created a workshop at work for students. I'm like, this book is so powerful. Here's like the top 10 things you need to know in a 30-minute workshop. And I give it to students all the time. And it's one of my most popular workshops. It's so digestible, you know, which I think is important when you're talking about these types of books. It's digestible. And literally, it's like, here are the 10 things that you can do to stop the stress cycle in the body. And I'll just give you one to know about. Breathing, obviously, is going to be one of them. But another one, physical activity. So we all know physical activity makes you feel good. You should do it. It's great for physical health, sure. But for the brain, like when the brain detects a stress, it triggers, it's like there's a threat in the environment. And it could be literally anything. It, you know, activates the stress response. You're in fight, flight, or freeze, and that's all happening. You can't stop that. That's just like what naturally happens for your survival. And so you have to be aware of, like, is my heart starting to race? Am I feeling the anxiety in my stomach? And like all those things that happen. And if you start to notice those things, it's because of, like, you know, evolution. You know, we used to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, right? We see the saber-toothed tiger, all that stuff happens, and we have to run. And all you have to do is run for 2 minutes, get your heart rate up. It's not even running. You can do jumping jacks. You could do dance to your favorite song. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Get your heart rate up for 2 minutes and then get your heart rate back down. And your body then tells your brain that we outran the threat. You could turn off the stress response. We're good.
Wow. Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
I'm not kidding that I do jumping jacks in my office sometimes. I'll close the door and just, like, you know, do something, get my heart rate up, get it back down. And because you can tell your brain all day, don't be stressed, calm down, relax. That does not work. That never works. You can't mentally change that. It's a biological process, right? The body keeps the score. So you have to use the body to tell the brain that you're safe and the threat is gone. And that's one of them. And in the book, they give you 10. So highly recommend that one.
That's awesome.
And I'll leave it there. Those are the two.
Yeah. Well, so one of those, the second one, the burnout one, was already on my want to read list. So now it's like double down on the want to read list.
For sure. I think you'd love it. You'd love it.
Yeah. And the brain says panic, and the body says, okay, now we did that. Time for something else. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It just makes it a little bit easier. So tell me more about Learning Circle. How does that?
Oh, yes.
How does that kind of facilitate a shared discussion around healing, and how does it help?
Yes, right. So it's been wonderful. Basically, you know, and this semester we're actually doing fiction, because I've been running it now for about 2 years, and we've read all of these fantastic books that are mainly creative nonfiction, you know, spiritual self-help type stuff. But this semester, like this month, we're doing The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And next month we've got Mad Honey coming. Yeah, and so if you've read that book, then you know that the story itself, I'm not going to give away any spoilers for those who haven't read it, but it's all about love, what we would do for love, what we're not willing to do for love, our public persona versus who we are in real life, kind of the masks we wear, right? And that's kind of the theme of the book. So whenever we have, you know, book of the month, there's themes, and then we use those stories and that theme to talk about our own lives and delve into our own stories. So once someone signs up, I send out a curated list of podcasts and videos that focus on that theme. You can watch them or none of them. Like, some people don't even read the book, honestly, because you don't have to read the book to be able to have the conversation. Once we get together, it's always on Zoom. You know, we talk about, actually, we always start with deep breathing, a grounding exercise. And then I have prompts prepared for us that are based on whatever that theme is. So like I said, for the 7 Husbands book, it's like, what are the masks that we wear and for whose benefit? You know, what would we do for love? What are our limits or conditions? What are things we're not willing to compromise on? And those are the questions that we talk about. So we're not talking about the characters in the book. We use them just as a backdrop to talk about our own lives. And then I usually give a journal prompt in the middle. more sharing. And it's great. You know, we connect. We focus, like I said, on courage, compassion, and connection. And I always give out homework because we meet twice a month. And in between those two sessions, there's mental health homework. And so it usually, you know, relates to the theme. And I encourage people to stay connected. There's been some really great like relationships and connections that have been made. Not everyone's local to each other because it is on Zoom, so people can be from anywhere. And but people have still, you know, found each other on other platforms and have stayed connected and formed some connections, which is awesome. Yeah, and so it's really fun, and it's definitely been a way for people to share, to create that container of safety that we talked about earlier, like sharing in a safe space where you know that this is an okay, you know, we set it up so that like everyone is okay to be vulnerable here. Yeah, and it's been powerful. It's been really cool.
That's awesome. And what was the book you said is coming up next for that?
Yeah, so in April we'll be doing Mad Honey.
Okay.
Who's that by? Who wrote that? I forget.
Jody. Oh, there's multiple.
Two authors, yeah.
Let's see.
It's a super good book.
Jody Picoult and Jennifer
Jody Picoult.
Finney Boylan. Is that the right one?
Jennifer. Yes, that's exactly right. Jody Picoult has written, I don't know, 20 books, tons of books. And Jennifer is, get this, talk about manifesting your dreams. Jennifer had a dream that she wrote a book with Jody Picoult, this famous author, and sent her a tweet and said, "Hey, I had a dream last night that you and me wrote a story together." And Jody said, "Really? What was the story?" She responded to her. And don't you know they created that book? And there it is.
That's awesome. I love that. That's great. That's really cool. Well, I added that one too. So
cool.
Check it out.
And then in May, every May we do my book because that's when it came out. So in May we'll be using Fragile Thoughts.
That's awesome. Now, if people are interested in Learning Circle, how do they join? How do they get there?
Yeah, it's as simple as on my website, they can like click on the Learning Circle tab and shoot me Venmo. It's $20 for the month. You know, pretty standard there. And then once I receive that, I'll have their contact information and be able to send them that curated list and go from there.
Awesome.
They'll
And
get the Zoom link and
I just posted the website again. So if anybody's interested in joining that, feel free to pop on there and do that for sure. Okay, cool. We're wrapping up towards the end. So if anybody has any more questions that they want to make sure to ask Katie, feel free to pop them into the chat. And we're going to get to the last couple of questions here. So what is your favorite life hack?
Yes, I love life hacks. I was thinking about a few, but I think my favorite one of all I started doing a couple years ago, which is, I don't remember where I learned it, but someone had said to use your computer password to type out something that you are, like a goal that you have in mind. Because you know how there's research, the more you write your goals, the more likely you are to achieve them.
Yeah.
So you type your password, I don't know, 20, 30 times a day on the computer, like just constantly, right? Every time you go away, you have to type it again. So for a while, my password was like take 5 deep breaths, exclamation point. So like as I would type it, I would start taking the deep breaths. It could be anything though. It can be remember gratitude 1, 2, 3. It could be go to the gym 3 times a week. It could be like gym 3 times or whatever your goal is, right? And just use your computer password for good.
I love that. I have never thought to do that. That's really cool. Just using like take 5 deep breaths, because then you're right. You're typing it and it's like, you're so much more likely to just do it right then.
Yeah, it's just a reminder, you know? And I used that one for a while. It was 3 breaths, then 4 breaths, then, you know, I have to change your password all the time.
Yeah. Eventually you're up to like 99 breaths and you're like, shit. All I'm doing is breathing. Gotta come up with a new goal. Oh, that's great. Well, it is time for the magic moment of the stream. So if you had a magic wand And you could waive it and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health. What would it be?
I love your magic wand. That's so cool. I would get rid of shame. I would just throw shame right out the darn window because, shame is what keeps people from not opening up and not seeking help and not talking to each other. So I would just get rid of the whole idea of shame. And then people wouldn't feel shame when talking about mental health, when seeking help. Yeah, I think that would do some good.
It really would, for sure. And this came from Bite Marks. She sent it to me through Amazon. So we've always had this magic moment at the end. It's always been the closing question. And it was one of those things that she was like, you need an actual magic wand. And so she got it for me. It's really good. It's really good. But yeah, eliminating shame. I think if we could do that, like that would make so many things so much better for so many people. So I absolutely agree with that. Well, I don't see any other.
You're doing it. You're doing it, Mama. You're working. You're making it happen. So thank you.
I'm working on it, and so are you. So we're out here doing it. I don't see any other questions, but Bite Mark does say, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I had a good time, learned some things, and added some books to my to-read list. And I will echo that as well. Like my Goodreads just grew by probably 10 books tonight. So that's great. But awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Katie. This has been a beautiful conversation. And I hope that this helps you make some connections to help with your next goal. And I'll just kind of open it up to you and say if there's anything that you want to talk about that you're working on or anything like that, feel free to just take the mic for a minute.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that so much. And, we talked about the learning circles. That's definitely been just such a passion of mine. It's been so fun to meet new people. So yeah, I think that and the Substack community of writers, that like those two things is where I'm spending most of my time, and would love to see people, join for free on Substack and see some of the writings, the journal prompts, join that community, share with each other what they're learning about. I love hearing from people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'd be great.
I'll have to check out Substack. Letting me share all that. That's new to me. So, but I just joined, what are the two that I just joined? I just joined Threads. I was not part of Threads. And I just joined Be Real because my 17-year-old really wanted me to join Be Real. So I've joined both of those. So it's not that I can't join a new one. I'm just not familiar with it yet.
I'm on Be Real. All of my college students are on it as well. So Be Real I'm familiar with. It's a younger generation one.
It was new. It was new to me. I was like, what are you talking about? And he showed me. And I was like, okay, actually, that's kind of cool. But then, so now whenever I do it, if it's after school, my 10-year-old is home. And he'll be like, I want to be in it. And so I wind up having all these retakes because he's not happy with, like, he wants to be in both sides. So he wants to be here, and then he wants to run in front of me and be in that one too. And it's like, well, I only caught part of your hair in that one. He's like, no, we have to redo it.
Oh my goodness. You're missing the point. We got to see two things, not one thing, twice.
But I actually really enjoy, that just the element of like, what are you doing right now? Everyone just talk about, like, show me what you're doing. That's it. It's great. It's wonderful. I think it's really cool. So
yeah, I agree.
But I'll have to check out Substack too. That'll be my next new one.
Yep. It'll give you a lot more things to read. If, that it's similar to, like, if you like Goodreads and if you're a reader, it's just going to give you short things to read that are fantastic.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Katie, for being here and for joining us and for this conversation. It's been really lovely.
Thank you. It's been awesome. Thanks.
And that's a wrap on my conversation with Katie Bean. I hope you found as much value in that discussion with Katie as I did. We covered a lot of ground: vulnerable storytelling, journaling, and the real-life impact of yoga on mental health. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're practical tools we can use to navigate the highs and lows of everyday life. When we talk about storytelling, it's not just about sharing a narrative. It's about connecting with others in a way that's real and honest. It's about saying, "This is me, flaws and all," and knowing that someone else out there is going to get it. And journaling is your space to figure things out, to let out what's been swirling around in your mind, and maybe even surprise yourself with what comes up and what gets onto that page. It's a way to stay grounded, to understand yourself a little better, and to keep track of your journey, no matter how messy it gets. And then there's yoga. It's not just something you do to get fit, it's something you do to take care of yourself, mind, body, and spirit. Katie reminded us that yoga is for everyone, and it's a practice that can help you stay present and find some peace, even on the toughest days. So as you go about your week, I encourage you to think about how these practices might fit into your life. Maybe you start by jotting down a few thoughts in a journal, or you take a few minutes each day to breathe and stretch. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be yours. And remember, it's okay to be vulnerable, to share your story, and take care of yourself in the ways that feel right for you. Before we go, I want to say thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you've been finding value in Even Tacos Fall Apart, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review or a comment wherever you're listening today. Your support helps reach more people who might need to hear these conversations. And don't forget to share this episode with anyone who could use a little encouragement or a fresh perspective. I am so grateful to have you as part of this community. We're all in this together, learning, growing, and supporting one another along the way. So until next time, take care of yourself, keep showing up, and remember, no matter how many times life knocks you down, you've got the strength to get back up.